Okay, you can begin.
Good night, everyone. Tonight we'll be presenting on Chapter 9 of Exploring Leadership, Being in Communities. Next slide, please. The members of our team, or in this case, community, are myself, Shakid Mayers, Denise Joseph, and Michaela Jordan Williams. Next slide, please. The topics that we'll be discussing tonight are the importance of community, elements of community, a common center, communities of practice, developing a community, and college communities. Next slide, please. Firstly, we have the importance of community. Next slide. Perfect communities do not exist in reality. We all live, work, and learn in imperfect communities, which, if they are striving to be better, become environments where individuals and groups alike can grow. Often in business, as a leader, you will find yourself involved in working on projects alongside members of your teams. In these instances, you may find it difficult to see the bigger picture and as a result, overlook certain details on a larger scale. Recognizing that each member of the community you've built is knowledgeable in their own right and has a wealth of experience that can aid you greatly. The members of your team can be fresh pairs of eyes you need to take your project to the next level by contributing innovative, impactful ideas. Members of your community also possess differing ethnic and cultural backgrounds that have helped shape their ways of thinking. Being part of a diverse community allows you to learn and become familiar with individuals' ways of living and thinking. Having a supportive and diverse workplace presents many benefits, especially increased critical thinking and empathy. Having a diverse community makes you a better leader, innovator, and individual in general. Next slide, please. Skill in the building and rebuilding of community is not just another of the innumerable requirements of contemporary leadership. It is one of the highest and most essential skills a leader can command. When you mention communities, you cannot do so without addressing the role leadership plays in the development of those very same communities. Leaders should treat the act of building communities as a discipline to be studied, internalized, and applied. They should seek to go beyond simply understanding themselves and those that work under their guidance, taking into consideration how the relationships in a group setting should be geared towards upholding a healthy dynamic and approaching tasks as ethically as possible, while operating in line with the responsibilities entrusted to members. One such instance where this level of consideration from leadership is crucial is a neighborhood assembling a neighborhood watch. They have to come together with the common goal of upkeeping the area and keeping residents safe. They might pool funds for surveillance cameras or create an alternating roster of community members who will carry out upkeep programs. Next slide, please. Now we have elements of community. Next slide. Community is not just a place where interaction occurs, but also an attitude of connection and commitment that sustains relationships and purpose. The community consists of people who are linked to each other socially, share similar outlooks, and often engage in joint activities. Next slide. Here we have components of a healthy community. First one, wholeness incorporating diversity. In order to prevent wholeness from smothering diversity, there must be a culture of peaceful coexistence and an open forum for contributing alternative beliefs. Diverse segments in a community must be committed to the common good. Accommodation and well-developed dispute resolution practices are necessary to prevent the diversity from destroying the whole. A shared culture. Leaders communicate and reinforce shared beliefs and values by adhering to a set of values that reflect those of the organization. Holding those appointed to leadership roles to that same standard and conducting operations in a way that ethically contributes to the vision and values of the organization ultimately shapes employee perceptions, behaviors, and understandings. Everything a community does is shaped by its organizational culture. Next, we have good internal communication. Some ways you can ensure that you have good internal communication is through allowing for employee feedback on decision making, spreading out information over time as opposed to delivering it in lump sums, and avoiding complexity when conveying information. Caring, trust, and teamwork. These are three crucial factors in the creation and development of a healthy dynamic among members of a community. Within an environment that can be fast-paced, high stress, and involve tedious interactions, fostering care, trust, and teamwork can elevate strictly corporate relations to ones that resemble those in a family. This dynamic allows for quicker dispute resolution, open communication, and more exchange of ideas. Group maintenance and governance. Maintenance entails acceptance of the opinions and outlooks of others, giving others recognition for accomplishments or contributions, calling group attention to reactions to ideas and suggestions by expressing one's own feelings and restating others' feelings. At times, to maintain group cohesion, you are even required to offer or accept compromise, yield status, or admit your errors. When you address members, provide stimulating, interested audience for others, draw out silent members, and suggest procedures for discussion. In regards to governance, an effective leader proposes tasks and goals, defines problems, suggests procedures, and sources different solutions for how issues may be handled. Additionally, you should reaffirm direction and purpose, suggesting a periodic agenda or order of business. Next, we have shared leadership tasks. In effect, shared leadership enables each employee to shoulder their work without the oversight from a command and control style manager. This approach abandons the top-down hierarchical approach of those in leadership passing down and allocating roles and responsibilities in favor of a more flat format, which spreads responsibilities and accountabilities out to every employee in the organization working in dynamic teams. This approach increases organizational performance, improved collaboration, transferring of knowledge, and innovative thinking. Development of new members. In spite of the fact that it is ultimately the individual's responsibility to take charge of his or her own professional development, it is to the employer's benefit to encourage continuing education by providing or facilitating both internal and external learning opportunities. The concept of professional development is not limited to optimizing an individual's skill set for a particular role. Rather, it refers to the process of continuing education that nurtures professionals and allows them to advance along their respective career paths. Lastly, we have links to the outside world. The primary purpose of external communications is to inform the outside world of an important message regarding the work and the qualities of the organization and observe the impressions of the general public. In addition to those formal methods of creating links, during everyday work activities, employees are continuously absorbing information and deepening their knowledge about the organization. Thus, whenever employees talk about your organization to the outside world, they become part of external communication. Through these methods of communicating, you establish and spread the image that your company wants to display to competitors and customers. Next slide. The advancement of communities. Communities may be presented as a group of people who are quite similar to one another in terms of ideologies, upbringing, or race. However, as we progress as a society, it is no longer practical or ethical to overlook the value that diversity brings to groups. As it currently stands, diversity of cultures, religious beliefs, skill sets, perspectives, and experiences all positively impact the results teams can produce if utilized correctly. If we all thought the same, had the same skill sets, had the same experiences, and came from similar backgrounds, that would leave very little room for innovation. Additionally, traditional views hold the stance that communities require in-person interaction in order to function and be cohesive. With the introduction and advancement of technology, our avenues for interaction have updated. We can now talk to relatives, friends, and people who share a love for the same hobbies, all without having to leave our homes. The creation of platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Discord, and Zoom have allowed for persons spread far and wide to meet in a virtual space with one another and exchange ideas, perspectives, and information at the press of a button. These mediums of connection encourage others to make themselves and their outlooks known in order to recruit like-minded individuals with whom they can develop and actualize ideas that serve as their common center. And with that, I'll be turning over to my teammate, Denise.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Shakil. Good afternoon. So I will be continuing a common center. Next slide. Okay. So one may ask, what is a common center? A common center is the reason, objectives, or ideas that inspires people to come together to form a community. Like, for instance, in your office, a group of workers may come together for a common goal to do something, whether it's to probably market a product or paint the office or plan an event. So that reason or objective that inspire them to come together form the community. Or to take another one, let's say I belong to like a dance group, right? And all the members in the class come together for that common goal. And that common goal really is to learn how to dance. So the common center is really to learn how to dance. So now that we know a little about that common center, let's move on to what is a community. There are many There are many definitions of community, but one such definition came from a philosopher, Martin Buber, and he describes a community as a group of individuals who come together to support a common goal. He also claimed that a true community is made up of individuals who have different viewpoints and complementary personalities, rather than a group of people who share the same opinion. Now, Martin Buber was a prolific scholar. He was a literary translator, a political activist, and an author. And one of his famous short but powerful books is I and Thou, in which he viewed our relationship with others as having two sides. Right? He claims that in our life together, we need community in some form because it makes life worth living, which in my opinion is true. Because belonging to a community gives you that sense of value, give you that sense of worth, that purpose. And I am sure most of us here are members of one or more communities. And when you meet with that community, don't you feel that sense of belonging? Don't you feel important? For me, I would say yes, because just knowing that I am that a part of that group gives me that feeling of belonging. Another definition given by a group of leadership educators define communities as the binding together of diverse individuals committed to a just common, committed to a just common purpose through shared experience in a spirit of compassion and moral justice. Next slide, please. So simply put, I will say a community is a group of people with common interests living or working together within a large system. And in order to develop communities, it is essential to have the relational leadership that deeply appreciates everyone's inclusion and gives them that freedom to cooperate to achieve that common goal. So now we will look at the characteristic of a community. There are many characteristics of a community, but I will just probably touch on about five, okay? The first one is openness, exposing oneself to other people's ideas and opinion in the community. Tolerance, the readiness to accept one's behavior and values that differ from your own, even if you disagree or disapprove of them. People who are tolerant display strength by being able to deal with others' points of view. Being tolerant of others not only makes peaceful coexistence possible, but it also has the benefit of promoting personal growth. Another characteristic is leadership. This is the ability of an individual or a group of individuals to influence and guide members of an organization. Leadership involves making sound and, yes, sometimes difficult decisions, developing and communicating a clear vision, defining attainable goals, and providing members with the knowledge and resources needed to achieve those goals. Another one is commitment. This is to achieve the shared objective, one must be committed. This is important because commitment fosters camaraderie, trust, and caring. These are things that a group needs to keep it going for the long run. Last but not least is passion, which you must compassion. You must be compassionate when dealing with when within a community. You have to be sensitive and caring to others. But what I have found while reading this material is that openness is the main characteristic of a community. We can even find these characteristics within ourselves when we reflect on our lives and the community we are involved in. It will show that we need tolerance, compassion, commitment, and openness. Which brings me to the next slide. Communities are a reflection of ourselves. They are the mirror in which we see our genuine self. When Hasselberg, Goldsmith, Beckhardt, and Schubert postulated that communities are a reflection of ourselves, what I think they were trying to say is that communities are where we demonstrate the values to which we are committed. In communities, the difference between our stated principle and our actual conduct becomes transparent. That's why they said, you know, communities are the mirror in which we see our genuine self. And this will bring me to another point, another point with what John Donne had said. He stated that no man is an island unto himself. And these words suggest that while we may often and must function independently to attain personal objectives and self-confidence, we must also interact with our friends and community. And now I will go on to community of practice. Next slide. Community of practice. Wagner defined a community of practice as a group of people who share concerns, issues, or passion about a topic and who enhance their knowledge and competence by engaging on a regular basis. This is a group of people that frequently connect and share a love or interest in the same activities, and they are constantly studying how to improve it. Next slide. Involvement within the communities of practice. Belonging to a community of practice means interaction with people who are committed to a common goal. Each individual belongs to many communities of practice, but to varying degree of significance. In some communities of practice, we are only peripherally involved, while the other communities of practice, we are actively involved. Rough and Paulus implies that it is not sufficient to think of yourself as just a member of different communities. They said membership may means having only passive connection or just a name on a roster. Some people in a community just are in a some people who are in a community are just there to say, well, yes, I'm in a community, or they're just a member. But how involved are you? Right? Next. Next, I will touch on the importance of community practice through social networking. The social network we formed in communities of practice are critical to accomplishing shared goals, as well as our personal identification and satisfaction. Noting the importance of social network, Potham's compared the importance of social capital to that of physical capital and human capital, which are resources and the training that enhance an individual productivity. What he's doing, he's linking the two concepts, which is the physical capital and the human capital, to the concept of social capital. And the term social capital describes the aspect of the social organization, such as like the network, the norms, and social trust that promotes coordination and cooperation for mutual benefits. Next slide. Now, focusing on community of practice also raises the question, how can communities best function to fully engage community members? Communities of practice function through policies, behaviors, expectations, and norms, and there are many more, but we'll be touching on just policies, which are a set of general guidelines. For a community to function efficiently, its policies and procedures must be well written. There must be guidelines. These are, these are just guidelines that will drive a community. Behavior, the way in which one acts or conduct oneself, especially towards others. Expectation. A firm conviction that something will transpire and materialize. Having one's perspective on a special topic heard and taken into consideration. The final one is norm. Those are values and beliefs and attitudes that most members of a group share, right? And other structures that may promote or may prohibit meaningful participation in a community. Next. Reciprocal processes. Being in community requires an awareness of reciprocal processes. A member has to decide to be part of the larger community, and the community has to involve and welcome members. Harvard sociologist Charles Wiley asserted that in any community, that is whether it's your work group, your classroom that you're in, neighborhood, volunteer group, your church group, contributive justice and distributive justice obligations coexist. Next, each next slide. Each member of the community must practice contributive justice. No, I'm sorry, go back. Sorry. This is where individual or members contribute to the group's ideas that is fair and acceptable for each person to do his or her part in the greater whole, to fulfill commitment and to feel a commitment of shared goals. Next, in contrast, the community must practice distributive justice. The community must care for all their community members and ensure that each is included, each one is heard and not harmed or disadvantaged. However, however, some members of community fail to fulfill their responsibility or to share the fundamental values that bind a community together. And when this happens, communities sometimes act to remove members who are not willing to uphold shared values. Serial, serial reciprocity. Communities thrive on serial reciprocity. Serial reciprocity exists when individuals give back what they have received. This means, like, let's say in your workplace, if Jason helped Chris meet his deadline for handing up his report, right? And Chris repays that kindness, not necessarily by helping Jason back, but when he helps like another co-worker, let's say Diane, put up like Christmas decorations, Diane likewise will pay Chris back when she probably helped him with his workload. So that is serial reciprocity. The sense of responsibility that each member has for the other member of the community form the civic culture of the community, which generates and regenerates its sense of community. Next. And with that being said, I would like to leave you with a lesson that was taught to Arun Gandhi by his grandfather, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, on his reflection on what causes violence in human life. Gandhi's seven social sins refers to as behaviors that go against the ethical codes and thereby weaken society. So the first one is wealth without work. Wealth without work is gaining wealth by unfair means, like by taking shortcuts, tax fraud. These are things how persons get rich without work. pleasure without conscience. This is earning happiness at the expense of others. This is obtaining pleasure with regards for people needs, like for example, sexual assault and things like that. Number three is knowledge without character. According to Bruce Lee, I like what he said. Knowledge will give you power, and character will give you respect. An intelligent person has character when they have attributes like integrity and honesty. The fourth one Gandhi father reflected on was business without morality. Business should be fair to all stakeholders involved. Unethical governance structure, lack of infrastructure, lack of integrity, poor working conditions are some of are some of the things that business without morality falls under. Science without humanity, this is the use of digital tools such as like social networking sites to spread social and religious blaspheming and radical extremists. The sixth one is religion without sacrifice. Religion today has been reduced to the mere practice of rituals, not bringing the religious teaching of compassion and affection and brotherhood in our lives. We need to bring that back. Compassion. You need to be compassionate. You need to have that brotherly love in religion. And the last one is politics without principle. Sorry. Which is politics in today's world are driven by greed and power, right? Politicians take this opportunity to undermine the citizen of the nation, whereby a politician supposed to be the voice of the people. The last one, sorry, that's the last one. So it is essential for our human, next. So it is essential for our human connection to develop a sense of responsibility for others in our communities of practice. And now I will put you on to my colleague, Michaela, who will be discussing developing a community.
Thank you, Denise. So good night, everyone. My name is Michaela, and today I'm going to talk to you about the development of community. To begin, we're going to look at the stages of developing a community. So according to Scott Peck, there are 4 existing stages of developing a real and legitimate community. First, we have pseudo-community. Second, we have chaos. Third, we have organization or emptiness. And the fourth stage is true community. Pseudo-community. This is described as the beginning of forming a community. People are polite and there is no conflict. This is due largely in part to the surface level relationships involved. Pseudo, of course, means not genuine, a sham, pretentious, or insincere. The second stage of developing a community is known as chaos. This is the stage when the community's agenda and important processes are instituted. This is where community members start voicing their different opinions and perspectives, and it's the stage where cliques and personal agendas may also emerge. At this stage, some members may retreat in order to avoid conflict. Now, chaos can look counterproductive, but it is the first genuine step towards community building. Peck states, fighting is better than pretending you are not divided. The third stage of developing a community can take 2 directions, organization or emptiness. So first we're going to look at organization. Organization occurs when the differences that arise in stage 2, chaos, are left unaddressed or unresolved, and instead the community focuses on established structures and systems for treating with any differences of opinion. So example, forming a new policy or a committee to mitigate a recurring issue without having any real conversation or hearing out those immediately affected. This can also occur if votes are taken and communities let the majority rule. But this leaves other members unheard and dissatisfied. This approach can cause underlying issues to worsen. Then we have emptiness. Defined by Peck, this transpires when community members, quote unquote, empty themselves of their barriers to true communication. By doing so, members are able to come to the realization that many personal feelings, opinions, perspectives, etc., act as barriers to effective communication. So, in order to achieve real group understanding and cooperation, it is necessary to rid oneself of all these preconceived notions and personal notions. Emptiness can be a difficult step as it is essential and requires the death of a part of the individual known as the ego. However, this individual ego death can pave the way for the birth of a beautiful new shared community. Lastly, we have true community. This is the last stage of developing a community when the community members are able to rise above and face their problems and conflict head on and in a productive manner. There's a general understanding that in order to achieve real shared decision making, members must explore and acknowledge disagreements, differences of opinion, and the focus is on we and not I. Scott famously said, "We cannot even let the other person into our hearts or minds unless we empty ourselves. We can truly listen to him or truly hear her only out of emptiness." As we can imagine, the chaos stage in development of community is particularly critical as it can determine the direction of whether a community develops to be wholesome and cohesive via emptiness, or a community focuses more on organizational structures over community voices and members, which leaves the door open for unresolved issues. So by Peck's own standard, the way through chaos to true community is through emptiness. Peck also stated, "In genuine community, there are no sides. It is not always easy, but by the time they reach community, the members have learned how to give up cliques and factions. They have learned how to listen to each other and how not to reject each other. Sometimes consensus in community is reached with miraculous rapidity, but at other times it is arrived at only after lengthy struggle. Just because it is a safe place does not mean community is a place without conflict. It is, however, a place where conflict can be resolved without physical or emotional bloodshed, and with wisdom as well as grace. A community is a group that can fight gracefully." So it's important for communities to acknowledge that even an established community is a continual process and not a defined end state. Communities are not static, they constantly change. This is because community members join and leave. New practices and processes may be introduced. There can be new norms and policies, or policies and norms can be redefined or reinstated. Communities must be willing to revisit the entire cycle of building a community in order to establish a genuine community or fine-tune when and if necessary. So, for instance, a real example for us is within the COSAC community, we recently saw a change in the appointment of a new college president, Dr. Keith Nurse, who will replace Dr. Gillian Paul, who is set to retire. So for many of us, this might be a big change, as some of us may have only known Dr. Paul as the president of COSTAT, possibly since we started our degree programs. And we could know many of us who work as well. A change in leadership style can sometimes result in things like a change in organizational culture, organizational structure, or even different focus on community focus and initiatives. So again, we see an example of where a community is not static, it's constantly changing. So in order to achieve a healthy community, William Goodicunst, renowned communications scholar, proposed 7 community practices that individual members should practice. So firstly, we have be committed. So be committed means a commitment to others is a prerequisite for communities to exist. Secondly, we have be mindful, which means to be conscious of what is said and done, be process-oriented and reflective in all behaviors and actions. Third, we have be unconditionally accepting, being accepting and open-minded to other personalities, opinions, and perspectives. And this also means to refrain from attempting to change, control, or minimize others. It is also best to minimize your own perceptions and expectations, prejudices, suspicions, etc. Next, we have be concerned for both yourself and others. This means to engage in dialogue whenever possible. Consult others on issues that affect them and be open to their ideas. Most importantly, as Peck says, fight gracefully. 5, be understanding. So strive to understand others as completely as possible. 6, be ethical. This is to engage in behavior that is not a means to an end, but behavior that is morally right in and of itself. And lastly, be peaceful. Do not be violent or deceitful. Do not breach valid promises or be secretive. The aim is to strive for internal harmony and harmony in relation with others. So if you are attentive, you'll probably notice that these 7 community practices are similar to the elements of community as previously mentioned by Shakid. So for example, some of the elements of community were wholeness, incorporating diversity, a shared culture, good internal communication, caring, trust, teamwork. So if group members adhere to and hold themselves accountable to community practices, the benefits to the community are limitless. There will be numerous benefits such as a culture of respect, cooperation, members will be willing to listen and learn from each other. There will be real conflict resolution and respect for differences of opinions and perspectives. So I have a question for the class. Can anyone here give an example of when they were or maybe they are part of a community now that they feel encompasses the 7 community practices? Anyone? Okay, we'll move on. Okay, so now we'll take a look at the following table that connects relational leadership to elements of community. So on the left side, you have some of the characteristics of relational leadership, which is chapter 3. And on the right, you have some of the characteristics of elements of community and also the 7 community practices. So we see inclusive is compared to wholeness, incorporating diversity, links with the outside world, which are elements of community. And then we have be committed, be unconditionally accepting, which are community practices. Then we have empowering, which is compared to a shared culture, group maintenance and development of young people, which are elements of community. Be understanding, be concerned for both yourself and others, which are community practices. And we have ethical, being compared to caring, trust and teamwork, elements of community, and be ethical, community practice. Purposeful, compared to participation and shared leadership task. And lastly, process-oriented, compared to good internal communication, being mindful, and being peaceful. So most of us should know Coretta Scott King as a famous American activist, civil rights leader, and the wife of Martin Luther King Jr. She was famously quoted as saying, "The greatness of a community is most accurately measured by the compassionate actions of its members." So when we examine the elements of community, the 7 community practices, and the characteristics of relational leadership, we can see an overarching theme which stems from just having compassion and being open and having respect for our fellow human beings. And this in turn is what really leads to true cohesiveness that is vital to a true community. So next we're going to look at the topic of college communities. College communities are generally regarded as learning communities and as communities for academics. However, these communities, much like larger society, do not exist without their own share of issues such as hate crimes, intolerance towards other organizations or clubs within the college, and also a lack of cohesiveness amongst the entire population. College communities are made up of various sub-communities, which each have a different purpose or focus, from organizational structure, meaning faculty, staff, students, and alumni, to sub-communities by department, program, or unit. So for instance, higher education communities tend to focus on learning, scholarship, and academic freedom, student development, and in contrast, many social organizations will focus on friendship, fun, and enriching experience. If you have a sports team, the sports team will focus on things like teamwork, success, skills, refining skills. So this is similar to real world society, where society is made up of different sub-communities and they all each have different cultures. So although they may occupy the same physical space and to an extent the same political and economic space, the values of these communities can often be different. Despite the nature of the community, the group members have an opportunity to experience a healthy community if their group adheres to the principles of community. College communities also present opportunities for people to experience a true sense of belonging and community. It's also important to note that smaller communities are part of developing the larger global community. In his book, 5 Building Blocks for Successful Communities, Morse is quoted as saying, "Identifying our common interests and broadening our relationships will be the defining elements of 21st century communities." The Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching was created by Andrew Carnegie, and its mission was, quote, "to do and perform all things necessary to encourage and uphold and dignify the profession of the teacher and the cause of higher education." In 1990, the Carnegie Foundation conducted a study of college students, faculty, and staff, which resulted in the following findings: that all groups wish for a renewed sense of community, but not in the way that older college cultures enforce community, which is through homogeneous campus models, but rather with a progressive understanding of the wide variety of subcultures, communities, and organizations existing on one campus for a shared purpose. So this is similar to what Shakid mentioned about the advancement of communities being something that's now becoming more ethical in order to celebrate and value diversity. The Carnegie Foundation would have also encouraged ideals of a healthy community, being purposeful, being open, being just, being disciplined, being caring. So I want to close off with a quote from Hasselbean et al.'s book, The Drucker Foundation, The Community of the Future. The global community of the future will be, at best, a series of communities that are interdependent and diverse, embracing differences, releasing energy, and building cohesion. The broader global community will be enhanced by the health of the many smaller communities that constitute the whole. Those living within each community define all communities. So that brings us to the end of our presentation today on Chapter 9. On behalf of myself and my colleagues, Shakida and Denise, I would like to thank you all for your attention. So at this time, we will invite any questions anyone has. No questions? Okay, thanks for your attention, guys.